Jimmy Methvin.
Here.
Mr. Al Perkins. Miss Elizabeth Pierre.
Present.
Mr. Virgil Robinson. Mr. Mark Romero.
Here.
Miss Christine Russell.
Here.
Mr. Joe Salter.
Here.
Mr. Brad Stevens.
Here.
Miss L'Oreal Williams. We have a quorum.
Thank you so very much, and welcome to everyone. It is so good to see your smiling faces in person. So good to see you. That is worthy of a round of applause. Huh? As a courtesy, please turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices. Be reminded that anyone wishing to make a public comment on a particular agenda item must complete a public comment card located on the table at the entrance and turn in the card to the UL system staff member. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you so much. Board Member Salter, could we please have the invocation?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have today to come to meet. And Lord, we at the beginning would give you thanks for your watch care during this time of pandemic. We pray, Lord, that you continue to guide and direct us and bless us as a state and as a nation. Lord, we pray that the decisions that we make today would be in the best interest of our students. We would pray, Lord, that we would keep uppermost in our minds the importance of their success, and we would pray that those decisions that we make would be help in that regard. And we pray for our leadership, Lord, on the board and for each board member, guide and direct us. For Dr. Henderson, Lord, and his staff, we pray that you direct them as well, and also for those who are at the campus level. We again thank you for your many blessings, and even though, Lord, we have many challenges and at various times in our lives, Lord, we thank you for the fact that you will see us through those, and in spite of all that, Lord, we have so much to be thankful for. You blessed us so individually and collectively, and for that we thank you, and we ask for forgiveness of sin for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Board Member Salter. May I please have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the last board meeting? So moved.
Second.
From Board Member Romero, second from Board Member Pierre. Today we are meeting as a committee of the whole, and everyone can vote on all items. Each committee chair will conduct the business of that particular committee. Are there any questions? May I have a motion to dispense with committee deliberations and meet as a committee of the whole?
So moved.
Moved by Board Member Donahoe and seconded by Board Member Kitchens. Thank you. Academic and student affairs. Any opposition? No, right? All right. Let's go forward. Academic and student affairs. Dr. Clark, could you please present for us?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 items on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee agenda today. 2 are action items that require approval, and the 3rd item includes faculty and student presentations, which are informational only. Each member previously received executive summaries and associated materials on the action items. Dr. Janine Kahn, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, will provide the report. Dr. Kahn.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Clark, and good morning to you, Chair Carter, President Henderson, and members of the board. It is certainly wonderful to be back in person and conducting business here in the Claiborne building, and it's a joy to see each and everyone's face in true dimensional form. We do have a very brief academic and student affairs agenda today with 3 items to consider, only 2 requiring action by the board, and I'll walk you through the 2 action items at this time. Agenda item E1 is a request from Nichols State University to offer 3 new undergraduate certificates in the following areas of study: Foundations in Management, Foundations of Marketing, and Foundations of Business Analytics. The 3 proposed UC will provide individuals the opportunity to focus on an area of specialization that will enhance an undergraduate degree and will result in a formal, recognized, and market-valued credential. The proposed UCs can be offered at no cost to the institution, since they will be supported by existing faculty who will provide instructional support in the classroom, and all courses required are already offered by the institution. Agenda item E2 is a request from the University of New Orleans to change the name of the School of Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering to the Boise Bollinger School of Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering. The school, established in 1980, houses the very productive and well-established BS in Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering, the MS in Engineering, and a PhD in Engineering and Applied Science. The university would like to recognize Mr. Bollinger's significant economic, financial, and charitable contributions to the state of Louisiana, the city of New Orleans, and UNO by naming the school after him. This change only applies to the name of the academic unit, which resides in the College of Engineering, and does not involve the naming of a university facility. Supervisor Clark, that concludes action items for your consideration today, and I'm happy to answer any question board members might have.
Do we have any questions or any clarifications needed for either item? All right, if no one requires any clarification, I'd like to go ahead and recommend approval of items E1 and E2. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Chair Carter moves, and Supervisor Russell seconds. Are there any questions, comments at this time from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion is approved. Today's faculty and student spotlights include a video presentation from Dr. Liz Skilton and an introduction of the 2021-2022 Student Advisory Council members, and I believe, Ms. Colley, you're going to take us through that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Clark, and good morning to everyone. This morning's faculty spotlight will be Dr. Liz Skilton. Dr. Skilton is an associate professor of history, the director of public history, and holds the J.J. Burden, M.D., and Helen B. Burden Board of Regents endowed professorship in Louisiana Studies at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Here is a video that Dr. Skilton has prepared to tell you a little about her work.
My name is Liz Skilton. I am an associate professor of history and the director of public history at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. I also hold the J.J. Burden and Helen B. Burden BORSF endowed professorship in Louisiana Studies. My research specializes in the history of recent disaster and human response to it in the Gulf South region. I mostly deal with Louisiana disasters, although it does extend broadly into the Gulf South area. My most recent book, Tempest, Hurricane Naming and American Culture, was published by LSU Press in 2019, and it reviews the history of the hurricane naming system. Every single year, we have had this discussion when new hurricane names are released as to where these names come from and what their history is. The book, Tempest, unpacks this history, looking at the effects of the hurricane naming system, the reason for its introduction, and how these names influence how we both react and respond to hurricanes before, during, and after their occurrence in the Gulf, and particularly as they impact us. It mostly traces this hurricane naming system through the 20th and 21st centuries, and it particularly deals with this overall question that comes up each year, which is why do we name hurricanes and what sort of impact do they have on us? That's just some about my research. Like I said, it deals with disaster and the Gulf Coast, and thank you very much for offering me the chance to speak to you about it.
We appreciate Dr. Skilton and the work she does for ULL and the state of Louisiana. Now I would like to share a little with you about our 2021-2022 Student Government Association presidents. We'll start with Cameron Jackson, a native of Birmingham, Alabama. He's a senior at Grambling State University. Cameron is majoring in computer science, math, and physics. Not only is Cameron the SGA president at Grambling, he has been elected by his peers to serve as a student board member for the Louisiana Board of Regents. From Louisiana Tech University, we have Kiara Bombard. Kiara is a senior majoring in kinesiology and is from Winfield. Kiara has been elected to serve as Student Advisory Council Service Learning Coordinator. Sarah Stafford is a senior at McNeese State University. Sarah is majoring in finance and is from Leesville. Sarah has been elected to the position of Student Advisory Council Chair. From Nicholls State University, we have Tyler Legnon. He is a graduate student majoring in business administration. Tyler is from Gibson, Louisiana, and has been elected to serve as the Council of Student Body President's parliamentarian. Taja Edwards is the SGA president at Northwestern State University. She is from New Orleans, and she is a senior majoring in biology. L'Oreal Williams, a native of Kenner, Louisiana, is serving her second term as SGA president at Southeastern Louisiana University and has been elected by her peers to serve as a student member on our board. L'Oreal is a senior and majoring in business management and marketing. ULL's SGA president is Reed Broussard, who is a Lafayette native. Reed is a senior majoring in public relations. Reed Broussard will be serving as the Student Advisory Council Vice Chair. ULM's incoming SGA president is Lauren Fee. Lauren is from Elizabeth, Louisiana, and is a senior majoring in secondary education. Amber Lamel is a senior majoring in marketing at University of New Orleans. Amber is from Leonville, Louisiana. And that is it. I met with this outstanding group of students a few weeks ago, and I am confident that they will lead their peers very well. So we are very excited about this group of SGA presidents. And that concludes my presentation, Dr. Clark.
Well, Ms. Colley, thank you very much for both those presentations. Certainly, we have appreciated, and I think it was Chair Carter that initiated the idea of elevating faculty voice, and certainly student voice has always been important to what we do and how we do things, and I look forward to the opportunity not only to hear from them, but I guess to meet them in person.
Absolutely.
They're going to be
Yes, sir.
in attendance at some point?
Yes, sir, they will.
Okay, sounds great. All right, any other comments related to either presentation?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Sarah Stafford has also been selected to represent our system as the student member on the recently formed Power-Based Violence Advisory Council. So we will be well represented there as well.
Excellent. All right. Is there any other business to come before the committee at this time? Hearing none. At this time, I believe the next items to be considered are athletics.
Hold on 1 second there. I want to complete the record on a matter previously dealt with, and that was the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. We had a motion and a second. I want to go through the board's process of saying all those approved.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Approved and accepted and adopted. All right. So we're going to move on to the Athletic Committee, and Board Member Russell is going to present.
Thank you. We have 21 items on the Athletic Committee today. Mr. Bruce Janae will provide a brief overview of the consent agenda items by campus.
Thank you so much, Ms. Russell, for stepping in for Dr. Condos. And as it's been said, it is so good to be with each of you in person. Item F1 through F2 is from Grambling, requesting approval of a contract with Dante Jackson, head men's basketball coach, and Freddie Murray, head women's basketball coach. Items F3 through F6 are from McNeese, approval of contracts with Georgia Pozan, head women's tennis coach, Brandon Gilroy, head men's women's track coach, James Lanterneau, head women's softball coach, and finally Ronald Letson, assistant football coach. Item 8.7 from McNeese, requesting approval of cooperative endeavor agreement to have their athletic training services provided at no cost to the university by Ochsner Clinic Foundation. Ochsner will provide these athletic training services of practices, games, and tournaments for various men's and women's sports. The initial term of this CEA shall be for 3 years commencing on July 1st, 2021 and ending on June 30th, 2024. After the expiration of initial term, this CEA may be renewed for additional 1-year periods. Item F8 from Northwestern State, requesting approval of a contract with Donald Pickett, head softball coach. Items F9 through F16 are from Southeastern, requesting approval of various contracts with Ayla Gazzardo, head women's basketball coach, William Nairo, head golf coach, Richard Freeman, head softball coach, Corey Mastretta, track and field coach, Jeremy White, women's volleyball coach, Timothy Donnelly, Associate Men's Baseball Coach, Ben Gibson, Assistant Men's Baseball Coach, and finally Kenneth Lee, who is the Associate Women's Basketball Coach. And our last items are from F-17 through F-21 from University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Approval of a contract with Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics, Dr. Brian Baggert, an amended contract with William Napier, head football coach. Approval of various amendments to the contracts of Matt Deggs, baseball coach, Gary Broadhead, women's basketball coach, Robert Moreland, the men's basketball coach, Gerald Glasgow, the head softball coach, and Lance Key, who's the soccer coach. Also requesting approval for various contracts with the assistant football coaches, Jeffrey Burrs, William Neighbors, James Norton, Galen Scott, and Darnell Stapleton. And finally, Ms. Christy Gray, head volleyball coach. And those are all the items we have, Ms. Russell.
Thank you. These agenda items have been reviewed by staff and are recommended for approval. Of course, if any member has a question or wishes to discuss these items, please speak now. Are there any questions, comments from the board, any comments from the public? If no one requires any further clarification of these consent agenda items, can I get a motion and a second for approval of items F1 to F21?
Motion approved.
Motion by Mr. Romero, second
Methvin.
by Ms. Methvin. Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Do we have any other business at this time? And if not, that concludes the business of the Athletic Committee, and we move on to Facilities Planning.
Proceed, Board Member Kitchen.
Thank you, and good morning. We have 10 items on the Facilities Planning Committee that are all consent agenda. Mr. Janae will provide a brief overview of the agenda items by campus. Bruce?
Thank you so much, Mr. Kinchin. Item G1 is from Louisiana Tech. Approval to name the newly developed Virtual Anatomy Lab in Carson Hall, room 237, the Justin and Jeanette Hinckley Virtual Anatomy Lab. This is to recognize the Hinckley's strong support in the development and construction of this laboratory. Item G2 is also from Louisiana Tech. Approval to name the two new student residential facilities, the Robinson Suites and the Pot Suites. Bertha Bradford Robinson was the first female African-American student to enroll in Tech in the fall of '65, and James Earl Potts was the first male African-American to enroll in the spring of 1965, and both are now deceased. Item G3 is also from Louisiana Tech, requesting approval to execute a ground lease with the Louisiana Tech University Foundation for the purpose of constructing a pedestrian plaza around a new sculpture that's been provided by the Percent for Art program administered by the Office of Cultural Development pursuant to state law. And to give you a little background, buildings constructed with more than $2 million in public funds in the state of Louisiana must be a part of the Percent for Art program, which requires that 1% of all construction costs be reserved to conserve, restore, install works of art on the grounds of state buildings. Louisiana Tech has indeed reserved a portion of their costs from the construction of the College of Business building, Tech Point, Integrated Engineering and Sciences building, as well as a renovation of University Hall to fund the creation of this sculpture that is worthy of the university's vision for quite a while. The foundation has secured funds necessary to construct the plaza that will showcase the sculpture and make the plaza a showcase link of Tech's traditional and enterprise campus. The project cost is estimated to be $260,000. The ground lease will expire when a substantial completion document is signed and all construction is completed. Upon completion, all improvements will be donated back to the university. Item G4 is from McNeese. Approval to enter into a facility lease agreement with the McNeese State University Foundation for the university's continued use and operation of the Center for Advancement of Meat Production and Processing, known to many of you as CAMP. In 2011, the Board of Supervisors approved the university's request to enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement for the creation of CAMP. McNeese has successfully managed and operated CAMP. This has included agricultural science with educational activities and training and workforce development, which have provided agriculture education benefits to the Southwest Louisiana community and the students of McNeese. Agriculture educational activities have included training in meat processing, packaging, preservation, marketing, branding, and transportation of meat products. The original lease will expire on June 30th, 2021, and the parties would like to continue and enter into a new lease agreement with the same terms and conditions. The primary term of the lease is from July 2021 until June 30th, 2026. Item G5 is from Nichols. Approval to enter into a land lease with the Nichols State University Foundation to construct a new baseball field house on the campus of Nichols. The land lease consists of property located next to their baseball field on the campus. Donor funding has been obtained by the foundation to fund the construction of this new field house at approximate cost of $1.2 million. The facility will be used as a locker room, team meeting facility, and office space. The lease will terminate on June 30, 2024, or upon completion of the construction. Again, this facility will be donated back to the university. Item G6 is also from Nichols. Approval to enter into a land lease with the Max Charter School. The university is requesting approval to continue with a land lease that they've had with Max Charter School. Max and that existing lease with the university expires as well on June 30, 2021. The university would like to grant an initial term of 3 years running concurrently with the Max Charter School's Board of Elementary and Secondary Education contract, which is from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. The Max Charter School has been performing a public need as there's no other facility in Lafourche Parish that specializes in the education of dyslexic students. The University College of Education also collaborates with the school as a resource that benefits its education major students and the students at Max Charter. Max Charter has constructed a facility under the terms of the original lease, and that structure remains in place at this time. Item G7 from Nichols. They are requesting approval to sell a parcel of vacant land at the southeastern border of the university main campus along Bowie Road through Legislative Act to Thibodeau Regional Health System. The university and Thibodeau Regional Health System have an ongoing collaborative and sponsorship arrangement already in place. Nichols desires to sell to this specific buyer at an appraised value as they have provided critical services to the citizens of local communities and region. Our board policy allows for this sale to a specific buyer if approved by legislative act. This past legislative session, there was House Bill 335 that allowed this. The university is also requesting to retain the funds from this sale in accordance with board policy. The appraised value is being established at present, but is expected to be in excess of $1.1 million. The university is currently getting that appraisal, and as soon as I obtain it, it can be made available to the board. Item G8, University of Louisiana at Lafayette, approval to demolish 4 agriculture buildings that were very old and damaged beyond repair due to the hurricanes we experienced in 2020. Item G9, University of Louisiana at Monroe, approval to enter into a grounds and facilities lease agreement with ULM Facilities, which is a nonprofit corporation, to construct and install artificial turf at the baseball facility. This addition will help with recruiting, but more importantly, will increase practice time and playing time as wet playing conditions will no longer be an issue. ULM Facilities Inc. anticipates total funding for the project will be approximately $1.3 million. The university's land or property will not be used as security for the project, and This project will be fully funded by private donations. The grounds and facilities lease agreement, just like the others, will expire when a substantial completion document is signed and all construction is completed. Again, this enhancement will be donated back to the university. Finally, item G10 from University of Louisiana Monroe, approval to name the newly renovated band rehearsal room the Jack and Coralie White Rehearsal Room. In 1970, Jack Weldon White was named Director of Bands at then Northeast Louisiana University. Of course, we know it now as ULM. Mr. White called the marching band the Sounds of Today, and he remains as the only Director of Bands Emeritus by the university. Also, his wife was very involved. Coralie White was on the piano faculty at Northeast and now ULM. She was his constant companion at football games, concerts, conferences, and other performances, and she set an example of what a wife has to endure if her husband is a band director. And those are our 10 consent agenda items, Mr. Kitchen.
Thank you, Bruce. All of these agenda items have been reviewed by the board and legal staff and are recommended for approval. Of course, if any member has a question or wishes to discuss any of these items, please let me know. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? No one requires further clarification of the agenda items. May I have a motion and a second for approval of items G1 through G10?
So moved.
Ms. Donahoe moves, seconded by Mr. Salter. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Any other business at this time for the Facilities Committee? If not, that concludes the business of the Facilities Planning Committee. And do we have a motion to adjourn? Second. The next committee is Finance.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Kitchen. Board Member Davison?
We have 5 items on the Finance Committee, 2 of which are consent items and 3 are discussion items. Mr. Eddie Meshi and Mr. Bruce Janae will provide a brief overview on the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Item H1, University of Louisiana,
Eddie.
Lafayette's request.
Make sure that button is pushed on that mic. Is it? There we go.
H1, University of Louisiana at Lafayette's request for approval of a tuition reduction for employees of eligible employer partners not to exceed $3,000 off the online RSN BSN program price. ULL currently assesses students $9,500 for its online RN to BSN program. This program has a provision to provide a discount up to $1,000 for community college partners, hospitals, and other targeted student groups. Market competition has increased, and ULL would like to increase its discount to an amount not to exceed $3,000. The minimum price would not be below $216.67 per credit hour. The amount of the discount would be dependent on factors such as the number of partner employees who would be attending the program. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a sense of the magnitude of the program? I mean, the current numbers and what this dollar amount?
I don't have specific numbers about ULL program, but I think it's fairly large. I would say, I would be guessing if I were to tell you, but I know it's a significant program. And I know the competition has strengthened. A lot of institutions are getting into this program. Other states are starting to have a requirement for associate degree nurses to have their RN. And this is a program to address that demand.
Supervisor Clark, it is one of the largest RN to BSN programs in the state by far, but he's exactly right. It's the proliferation of for-profit, nonprofit, and public online RN to BSN programs have made the environment just much more competitive.
No, Dr. Savoy, is there anything further to add in terms of, explanation? I'm, again, curious not just the size of the program, but the financial impact of that we're considering here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Henderson. The program has about 600 students currently, but we're not talking about a discount for those students. This is related to partnerships that we've developed with corporate partners, one of which just made a very significant financial gift to our nursing program. And they want to do something about enhancing the educational levels of their employees. So they have 35,000 employees. This is an online program. And so we've got some benchmarks. If they meet so many, then we can discount it that much, et cetera.
Excellent.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, and I appreciate the explanation, also the working with the corporate world in trying to do it. And this particular vendor, for lack of a better term, is nationwide. Is that correct? So that
30,000 employees in 35 states.
Okay. So the reach is significant here.
Hope so.
notice our operating services at 96%. That's a pretty big line item. I think the reason that it's higher than what you would normally expect at this time, 96%, is because some energy surcharges have not been moved for those utility costs, which are pretty significant. If you consider those, it's about what you would expect. So I'd like to move on to auxiliary operations.
Just one question. The terminology here in the revenues, student fees. Clarify, that's student tuition and fees?
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason we don't break those out?
We can, if you'd like to see both together. I was just trying to make this a summarized report. But if you'd like to see those separated, I'd be glad to do that.
I think it's just, it helps sometimes, at least from my perspective, to try to get a handle on what we are charging in addition to the sticker price tuition in terms of fees. And certainly at the campus level, I know that I've asked questions, probably too often relative to it, but I want to make sure that we maintain affordability, with 90% of the budget, under, or 90%, I guess, of the proposed budget collected there. Having some differentiation would be helpful.
So the answer is going forward, we'd like it breaking out that way.
We can do that. Or we can prepare a separate schedule that would break that out for you too.
And that's fine. I'm not looking for additional work function, but just clarity. That's good.
No, that's a great point. We can do that.
Mr. Davidson, I have a question as well.
Yep.
Under the other revenue, does that 18 million include any federal money from like the CARES Act or anything like that?
No. I'll be talking about CARES Act a little bit further in this report. But
Okay.
The CARES money that universities are receiving now are not flowing through the operating fund. They're going to restricted funds. As their expenditures are incurred, then they request reimbursement. But it's not flowing through this statement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to auxiliary operations. Most campuses are experiencing some operational deficits in a significant part because of COVID-19. A lot of dorms were not fully occupied. Food sales were not as great because students were not on campus. This is no surprise. Consequently, some of those auxiliary operations are showing deficits. And I want to pay those deficits at the universities that are scheduled there. These are current year deficits. And in addition to that, UL Lafayette has a fund balance deficit of $8.3 million. Now, to offset that, campuses will be able to apply CARE Act funds to offset some losses, and this will really help to change these numbers by the end of the fiscal year. Those are not recorded yet in most cases. When the year is finished is when those numbers will be known, and then they can apply those funds to really help these.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this was one of the key elements of the CARES Act funding, was because of the revenue loss associated with auxiliary enterprises that was expected to be significant for all the universities. That's why the Congress ensured that lost revenue could be made up with CARES Act dollars to address the specific issue.
Can I, tagging onto that, when we're saying CARES Act, we're not including in here then the American Rescue Plan?
That's part. When I say CARES Act, I'm summing those in those 3 different grants, and I'll break that down.
So that is all 3 tranches of the federal stimulus packaging?
Right. Correct. And it's a significant amount of money, as you'll see.
Let me ask a question relative to the CARES Act funds. You have a notation here, the CARES Act funds could reduce or eliminate some of these deficits. Could it completely eliminate these deficits?
It would depend on the campus and how much they were able to claim. The CARES Act
Is campus specific?
It's type of expenditure specific. So if, let's say, a majority of their losses were in the dorms, then I would say that could be applied. In other places that the CARES Act may have specific exclusions where it's not permissible, then you would not be able to apply those funds. But I will say there's enough money, there's enough CARES Act money to cover losses that are permissible. It's just you can't can't spend money that is not permissible.
Right, so money that it is permissible to spend in areas of deficits, about what percentage of the deficit, roughly, anecdotally, would we be able to eliminate?
If CARES Act covered those particular losses for this year, then it could eliminate.
Yes, that was my question.
If the reason for the deficit was related to COVID-19.
I understand.
Then
Understand that. I'm just asking you if maybe there's something you can't answer. I'm just trying to understand with regard to the allowable expenditures from CARES Act and to put it in the particular categories, understanding what you said, that it's limited to certain type of applications. What percentage of the total amount, the total deficit, do you believe that we'll be able to eliminate?
I don't have that information.
Okay.
That would have to come from the campuses.
Okay.
But I would say auxiliary services, by and large, a lot of these losses will be covered by CARES Act funds. But I can't say all will. We'd have to take each individual operation. Auxiliary operations is not just one type of operations. There are quite a few that are on a schedule. And so I don't know if I can say all will be covered, all will be eliminated. I think those numbers will be compiled at the end of the fiscal year. This is the third quarter. Then we'll know. And we can report that for the last quarter.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you may have just answered the question that I had relative to institutional reporting of use of these funds. Are we collecting at the system level in a similar way, definitions and utilization and so on? Because I know that the ARPA money in particular is directed strictly to the institutions, and they are reporting directly to feds on this.
Correct. Those CARES Act monies are received directly by the institutions from the Department of Education.
Correct.
And those institutions are required to report how they spent those monies.
To the feds.
That's right.
Right.
To U.S. Department
U.S.
of Education.
Department
There
of
are quarterly reports where you have to have ongoing reporting, and there's a comprehensive report at the end of the year. It's a statistical report, it's a financial report, and it's pretty involved. But you submit that, those institutions will submit that to the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education will evaluate those reports, and if it's not complete, they'll request more information. If they are complete, then they'll accept that report, and that reporting is pretty much done for that fiscal year. It would detail how the institutions spent that money.
But Eddie, you also have a report that's collected at the system office, right, that's following all of the COVID-19 related expenditures?
Well, we have a summary schedule which I will go through, and I can go through that column by column just to show you how much we've received as a system. But that information is coming from the institutions, and we're compiling that from the institutions' information.
And I guess what I'm hearing you say, yes, we are keeping track of the numbers of dollars that are being received and or expended, but are we maintaining an ongoing understanding of how they are being expended and to what purpose at the system level?
There are basically two categories of how institutions spend CARES Act money. One is on students, and the other is institutional. Student money has to be spent on the needs of students. There's really, it's pretty narrow requirements, and basically each student that qualifies receives an amount that's been calculated by the institution. There's not much discretion there, but with the institutional money there is some discretion, and there are some guidelines to guide institutions as to how they can spend that money, but some of it may require some judgment, using your best judgment based on what the U.S. Department of Education has provided, regulations, and also the question and answer documents that they've submitted. And that's basically how you make that determination. Some are kind of gray. They're not specifically mentioned, but they fall in those general categories, so institutions have to make that choice.
Right. And Mr. Mitchell, you're getting at what I guess I'm curious about, and that is, in this area of discretion, or this gray area as you just termed it, are we compiling and keeping track of then what the institutions are actually spending the money on, or are we just keeping track of a dollar amount? I think it's important that we understand how the institutions are deciding to actually use it, and then hopefully determine the effectiveness of those expenditures and or the long-term sustainability of them and so on and so forth. I think it's a good opportunity for us to learn, but I'm not sure because of the way that the federal U.S. Department of Ed has decided to, push it directly to the campuses, that at a system level, we might not have as much awareness as might be helpful.
Right. Well, there are some reports that institutions provide about their COVID losses with the presumption that if they are losses coverable by COVID-19, once the analysis is done, then yeah, we do have that information, but not in a summary form. But we could request that information if that's what the board would like to see.
So we're collecting it in broad categories, right? So these are the issues that are associated with technology for students. These are the dollar amounts associated with lost revenues. And so we have those summaries available, and we collect that. It's what we reported to the legislature. And each institution is going to be a little bit different because of their different business mix. Yeah, some institutions have a much larger auxiliary enterprise than others. You have institutions that receive dollars as minority-serving institutions because they have some very specific things. And so we have those broad summaries, and we can provide a report to the board and see if it answers the questions, or if you want us to get even more granular than that. I think that'd be the best approach.
Again, I'm personally most curious about the purpose for which the dollars are spent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They would fall into categories essentially provided by the U.S. Department of Education.
That's right.
I think during the legislative session, I remember as well that the legislature expressed great concern about seeing details to go along with just what you said. So either you will be asked or you've already been asked.
That's right.
Provided that you're saying you have.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Next, I'd like to talk about athletic deficits and...
Eddie, you have to pull that microphone right up to your
I'm
mouth.
really struggling.
They're not sensitive at all.
Okay, how about that? Is
There
that
you
better?
go. Much better.
Okay. Next are athletic deficits and athletic scholarship costs. We in the past have reported athletic deficits, but I thought maybe to make a comparison of scholarships to show what might be contributing to some of those deficits. Budgeted scholarships are basically a certain amount of money that the athletic program is paying for the scholarships of their athletes. And those costs have been rising over the years, mostly because of the increase of tuition and fees. So, in probably years 2011 to about 2016, because appropriation were reduced, institutions have raised their tuition. And so as they were doing that, it was helping the universities balance their operating budget, but at the same time, it was costing athletics more for scholarships. So that's an expenditure on their financial statements, and so it affects the bottom line. So just to demonstrate that, I just created a couple of columns for the board to review. First column is the current year deficit, which COVID-19 has contributed to some additional deficits in athletics. But if you just add back the cost of those scholarships, which those monies, for the most part, stay within the institution, just moving money from one place to another, mostly from the athletic budget to the operating fund. It changes, if you will, the bottom line. So if you just take one example, let's say Louisiana Tech has a $1 million deficit. They paid 3.8 or will pay $3.8 million in scholarships. So it's not necessarily money being dispersed out of the university, but it's being dispersed out of the athletic department. So if you add that back, considering the institution as a whole, it's really, they're not in the red, they would be in the black if you were to do that. Now, accounting principles require you to show those expenditures in athletic budget and the financial statements, but it just gives you an idea of the challenges that athletics have had because of those increased costs, because of the higher tuition and fees, as you mentioned earlier.
It's for board members to understand, it's so that the scholarships are expensed to athletics at the price level, not at the cost of serving the student, right? And so what happens is the institution recognizes a revenue source and then assigns an expense to athletics that is a price level instead of a cost level. And it can sometimes result in faulty analysis on the true financial viability of the athletic operations. And that's what he's trying to demonstrate with this. If you look at that scholarship amount, the actual amount of serving the students is far less than that. It also doesn't recognize the number of students that attend our institutions as athletes that are partial scholarships and non-scholarship athletes, and the revenue that generates for the institutions. None of that is calculated in the balance, and it creates a misunderstanding, misappreciation of athletics. Certainly, athletics can be a very pricey enterprise, an undertaking, and it's one that has to be controlled and has to be evaluated. But it has to be evaluated in a way that you can say, here is the true operational cost of athletics. Here's the revenue source that comes with it, and this is where the challenge rises. We're going to be having a deep conversation about the cost of athletics at our president's retreat in August, but we wanted the board to be aware of some of these anomalies in the way that the accounting results in reports. Is that fair, Eddie?
Yes, sir. Any questions? No.
Thank you.
So just to add, it's broken out into two pieces. One is the current year deficit, and then the next section is a cumulative deficit. And we show the same effects of scholarships on those deficits. Not to say that that's not a true expense of athletics. It is. But institutionally wide, it would be unfair to compare disbursements that go outside the institution with those that stay within the institution. That's what this is trying to show.
Very good. Thank you, Eddie.
Question?
Yes, sir.
This may be premature, but given the recent Supreme Court ruling and the impact, is that what the board retreat is to be talking about, or the president's retreat? Or
Supervisor Clark, that'll certainly have to be part of the conversation. And what happened, and for those of you board members that don't know, the Supreme Court recently ruled that additional educational-related expenses outside of tuition and fees, or what's typically under scholarship, are allowable expenses. Think, for instance, about a laptop computer or textbooks or other types of aid associated with athletics. Now, those would be expenses that would be part of a scholarship, but absolutely are expenses of the athletic department, because those are not things that we generally provide for students everyday students. And so those would have to be, in my opinion, a discrete line item that would have to be tracked and is part of the athletic operation. It's going to be a long, dry retreat, yes.
Okay, so we talked quite a bit about COVID-19, so I think this will help give you some idea of the amount of money that institutions could receive and how much they've drawn down based on the expenditures that they've had. So if you look at HERF 1, and HERF 1, HERF 2, HERF 3, those are all, when I say CARES, that's what that means. And HERF 3 is really the ARP money that you were talking about. So just to give you some idea time-wise, higher education emergency fund was the first one. That was HERF 1. That was in March 2020. And then higher education relief fund, another HERF 2, December 2020. And the latest was the American Rescue Plan, March of 2021. So all those are basically added to the ones before. So if you add them all together, the amount that could be available to institutions is a very big number, about $436,000. Not to say that all that will qualify, it's just available in the event that it does. Amount drawn down so far is about $119. Most of that HERF 1. So to talk about the student portion, it's very restrictive. It can only be used for students. It's basically to give financial aid grants to students to help students meet cost of attendance for emergency costs that arise because of the coronavirus. And there's another requirement that institutions must prioritize based on need. So the more need a student has, the more you would try to provide to them because their needs are greater. funds are intended to provide financial assistance to institutions for additional cost from the coronavirus. So, and that's very important because it has to receive the money, the expense has to relate to the coronavirus. If it doesn't, then it may not necessarily qualify. And that's the case in auxiliaries that we talked about earlier. So it's really, you have to get into the details to know what qualifies and what does not qualify. Just a few examples of institutional costs. A big part that will be important this year is lost revenue. A lot of institutions have lost revenue, including those auxiliaries that we talked about earlier. So if a student housing facility was empty because of the coronavirus, or there were fewer students because of physical spacing that you had to have to protect students, well, those lost revenues could be covered to help shore up those auxiliary operations. If it's not related to COVID-19, then you wouldn't need to use those monies. Others are technology costs with the transition to distance education, additional financial aid grants to students. Institutional funds can be used for that too, and it's actually encouraged. And another big item recently is the discharge of student debts. So if a student is currently in school or was in school after March 13, 2020, then there's opportunity to assist those students by helping pay some of the debts they have to the institution. So if a student is struggling to pay their debts or upcoming debts and is preventing them to continue going to school, then institutions could apply those COVID-19 monies, CARES Act monies, 1, 2, or 3, to a particular student to lower that amount owed to the institution and perhaps allow them to continue, get their transcripts, maybe even re-enroll into school if that was preventing them from doing so. This is
That's using institutional dollars rather than student dollars?
institutional dollars.
And one of the things members to understand is that the regulations associated with all three of these tranches continues to evolve. And what happens is the U.S. Department of Education will release their first round of regulations associated with it, and then they try to anticipate all the possible questions that can come up. And then questions come from the 2,000 institutions around the country. Well, what if we paid for this? And then you'll get an answer, and then you think you know with clarity, and then you change one of the variables a slight amount, and they say, well, no, you can't do that. We saw this on a couple of expenditures that were very clearly allowed, that were questioned by some, and so it's an evolving circumstance. And so my heart goes out to all of our CFOs on our campuses because they're having to navigate through this. And we do it collectively. We've had a number of conversations with each of them. As we get clarity on some of this, we share that with each institution so that we're all working from the same sheet of music. Another complicating factor is not just the evolving regulations associated with HERF, but each one of these three HERF tranches had a different set of regulations, some of which are applicable retroactively, some are not. So it is a little bit of a hodgepodge of things. At the end of the day, we've gotten extraordinary resources to help mitigate the vast majority of the financial impact of COVID-19. That's the good side of it. It's the details of it are going to be the part that we have to continue to work through. As we near the closeout on this fiscal year, I think we'll be able to provide a great summary document to the board to show you exactly how these, especially the institutional aid was utilized to offset both cost and lost revenue that I think you'll find very instructive. But our CFOs are continuing to navigate a maze of, well, as John Mayer would say, a maze where the walls all continually change.
Some changes have happened retroactively. So in the original grant, that grant might say that you can't use it for those particular purposes. And then later on, as they gained some experience on need, they began to retroactively change those regulations so institutions can use those funds.
Thank you.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes, ma'am.
Do these funds have a timeline, or do they expire?
Yes, they do. And that's what makes this even more difficult. Generally speaking, institutions have 1 year to spend the money from when they were appropriating the funds. But with each increment change, that deadline is pushed back another year. So like HERF 1, let's say if it were appropriated appropriate on January 1, they would have up to December 31 to spend those funds. But when HERF 2 came along and HERF 3 came along, then those deadlines have been pushed back, thankfully. And there are provisions for what they call a no-cost extension. So if you're having difficulty, say if you've incurred expenditures already and you just haven't completed the process, they will allow you some additional time to spend that. But this is a tremendous amount of money in a short time to spend. So they've already extended deadlines in the past and might again, but there's no guarantee. Just a couple of additional provisions for the American Rescue Plan. They have a couple of additional requirements that they have. One is to implement evidence-based practices to monitor and suppress coronavirus in accordance with public health guidelines. Congress did not specify any required strategies or methods, nor any minimum specific amounts that must be spent. So there we go back into judgment from the institutions, making reasonable judgments as to how they might accomplish that goal. A second requirement is to conduct direct outreach to financial applicants about the opportunity to receive financial aid adjustment due to recent unemployment of a family member or independent or other circumstances described in Section 479 of the AGA. So they have to educate students of these opportunities. And institutions are required to spend some ARP money on that. As I said before, institutions generally must expend their grants within 1 year from the date of the department processing the most recent obligations and funds for each grant. But no cost extensions up to 1 year are available under certain circumstances. So it's a tight window, but there are allowances to extend that to make sure that they can get those students. This completes my report. This report only requires no action of the board. If you have additional questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say, I want to welcome Eddie Mesh. Is this his first board meeting? So Eddie has been at McNeese State since 2008, I believe, 2003. Led that institution through some extraordinary challenges. He is universally respected by his peers, and he's a tremendous asset to us. I also want to take this opportunity to thank a guy that's no stranger to many associated with our system, but maybe to most of our board members, and that's Robbie Robinson. Robbie is over there. Wave, Robbie. Robbie was a longtime CFO for our system. He continues to be a friend of the system. He's on the board of the U.S. System Foundation, and for the last 90 to 120 days, thereabouts, he has been sitting in our CFO office, assisting us navigate some of these very challenging roads. He'll continue to help us. We just won't pay him anymore. But Robbie, I want to thank you very much for your help throughout.
Thank you, Dr.
All right, does that conclude the presentation?
Yes, sir.
One last.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other business? I know we'll reiterate that we're going to ask that tuition and fees be broken out separately in future reporting. I know this CARES Act will probably get a rear view down the road and see how we did, I guess. But we understand that that's happening at the institution level, and there are time constraints, so we probably definitely don't want to slow them down. So, any other business for the Finance Committee? Do we need a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee, or we move on to the next?
No, we
Thank
don't.
you.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for your inaugural leading of the committee.
Stand in.
Great job. Also want to thank Robbie Robinson. Again, thank you for your help in helping to bring us to this point. We really appreciate your service. And congratulations to you also, Mr. Mesh, in your first, in your inaugural presentation before the University of Louisiana System Board and to the community. Thank you so much. You did a great job. Want to move on now to Board Member Donahoe and deal with the Personnel Committee.
Thank you. We have 6 items on the Personnel Committee agenda today that are being presented on the consent agenda. Dr. Marcus Jones will provide an overview for today's items. Dr. Jones?
Thank you, Ms. Donahoe. Good afternoon, Chairman. Sorry, board members. Item J1 is McNeese State University request for approval to appoint Ms. Mona White as interim vice president for business affairs effective June 1st, 2021. Item J2, Nicholls State University's request for approval to appoint Ms. Jean Donegan as dean of liberal arts effective July 1st, 2021. Item J3, Nicholls State University's request to appoint Dr. Denise Janice Lynn as dean of students effective March 17th, 2021. Item J4, Northwestern State University's request for approval to appoint Dr. Joel Hicks as dean of the College of Nursing and Allied Health effective July 1st, 2021. Item J5, Northwestern State University's request for approval to appoint Ms. Rita Cox as vice president of student experience effective July 1st, 2021. And item J6, University of Louisiana at Monroe's request for approval to appoint Dr. Michelle McCann as dean of the College of Business and Social Sciences effective July 1st, 2021. Ms. Donovan, that concludes the items to be considered.
Are any of these people present that maybe some of the presidents would like to introduce to us today?
The Northwestern.
And Dr. Burkell is your person as well? If y'all would come forward, please, so that we could put a face to a name.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce 2 very special people. The first one is Ms. Krishan Youngblood, who was not able to be presented at our last board meeting, who is now our new Chief Diversity Officer and Director of Office of Inclusive Excellence. And she has a plethora of experience, of life experience, and is truly going to create culture on our institution that I think all of you will be very proud of. And also we have Ms. Mona White, who has been with us for over 17 years, but over 30 years in industry, and also 17 years in higher education, who was our Chief Financial Officer, Chief Accounting Officer, and with the departure of Mr. Eddie Mesh, we have a person that we believe is going to be a great part of our team and be a very strong part of our leadership team. So I'd like for them to say a little something if they would.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you all. I do have to say I received this promotion as a member of the ULS, Management and Leadership Institute, cohort number 4. Some of my classmates are still here, and I am so appreciative of their support. Going forward for the Office of Inclusive Excellence, I do plan to work towards building programs for our faculty, staff, and for our students to understand the inclusive excellence part of our program, but also to understand that there will not be any harassment retaliation, nor disrespect to them according to our state laws and the policies and procedures that we do have on campus. And thanks to my cohort, I do now have new tools that I can utilize in order to move our office forward. I am definitely looking forward to the student component and working with our students as the SGA president, Ms. Sarah Stafford. She is also my student worker. So I am truly excited working with the students, building platforms where they feel included on the campus, but not only that, that they belong, that McNeese is their university. That campus belongs to them, and it funnels out into our community as well. And some of the initiatives that we do have coming forward are coffee chats, where everyone can come, have a cup of coffee, have a bagel, let's sit down and have a discussion. And moving from there, working with Sarah, we also have developed Cowboy and Cowgirl roundtable discussions, where our students have a safe place that they can express themselves and not feel like they are being judged. And also, they can bring forward items that they would like to see on campus, and we can work towards that. And once again, I'm truly excited about this opportunity. I do feel supported not only by my president, who volunteered me to be a part of this fabulous cohort, and my board members, the ULS staff, and just thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Great choice, Dr. Burkell. Great choice.
Thank you, Dr. Burkell, and I want to thank all of you, too, for this fantastic opportunity. McNeese gave me an education that has afforded me a lifetime of success, and I am so honored to be able to pay something back to my university and our community. Thank you.
Two great choices.
Madam Chair, before he leaves, I just have to make make a statement. This is the first time the board has been in the presence of Daryl Burkell since two of the most powerful hurricanes that have ever hit the coast of Louisiana or the United States hit within 6 weeks, 15 miles apart, and wreaked havoc on all of Southwest Louisiana. The shining beacon for Southwest Louisiana, and I think in large part one that has given inspiration and helped those people be resilient, has been McNeese State under the leadership of Daryl Burkell. And I just think it's important that, since it's the first time we've been in person, that the board have an opportunity to thank Daryl for his stalwart leadership and the model he has given. It's worthy of emulation for all of us. Daryl, thank you for that.
And Dr. Burkell, I would be remiss as board chair not to echo. Dr. Burkell is my homeboy, if y'all didn't know. And we appreciate, as a continuation of your leadership, you obviously selected two other great leaders, but we are so proud and so honored to have you to serve in a position that you've served in, and to witness the incredible leadership that you have done at some of the toughest times in history of the state of Louisiana. So as a board, from the board chair's perspective, and my other colleagues up here, we just want to thank you so much also.
Let me also say thank you to the board and to Dr. Henderson for the support during this time. We came out of the legislature this past month with about $10 million in capital outlay for disaster recovery, with another $4 million for disaster relief for our budget. So I can't thank y'all enough for the support, working with our legislators in our area to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Maggio, I see you're coming forward to introduce your new leaders.
Chair Carter, Supervisors, President Henderson, I'm honored to introduce two great leaders at Northwestern State University. After a national search on two very important positions at our university, I'd like to introduce to you Ms. Retha Cox, who is our new Vice President for the Student Experience. Retha has been at Northwestern for 33 years. She was a student leader in her undergraduate years. She has served in several capacities including on the enrollment side as a recruiter for the university, fraternal Greek life director for the last several years. She's been director of new student programs and student life, and then director of student affairs for the university. Sitting to her left is Dr. Joel Hicks. Dr. Joel Hicks has been at Northwestern since 2010. He was a practitioner in the healthcare field for the 16 years prior to that. In 2017, he was the named director of our School of Allied Health, and since January, he has served as our interim dean of our College of Nursing and School of Allied Health. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you Ms. Retha Cox and Dr. Joel Hicks.
Thank you, Dr. Maggio. I am so honored to have this opportunity and to be supported and entrusted with the student experience at Northwestern State University. I have worked with Dr. Maggio and Dr. Jones very closely for a number of years, Dr. Henderson and many of you on the board as well. When I arrived at Northwestern State University almost 40 years ago as a first-generation college student, I quickly learned the importance and the value of identifying mentors and positive people to surround myself with. And Northwestern has contributed so much to my life. I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've been given, and I'm looking forward to guiding our students and the university in this next phase of student experience at Northwestern. Thank you.
President Maggio, board members, thank you all for this opportunity to speak just for a few moments. I'm so honored to be here, to be considered for this position. I have worked in healthcare for a long time and also in education for a long time. I truly believe that education is life-changing for people, and in particular, nursing and allied health education can be generational changing, and I'm so honored to be part of the programs that we have at Northwestern State. We're surrounded by amazing faculty, staff, and most especially our students at Northwestern State are, I believe, just the most important part of this piece of what we do, and I'm so excited about the possibilities that we have for our nursing and allied health programs at Northwestern State. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Mr. Chair, if I could too, I also want to welcome to the UL System meeting Mr. Johnny Cox, who is Retha Cox's husband, and together they are not only stalwarts at Northwestern State, they're stalwarts in the Natchitoches community, which is so important. And also need to recognize that these are the last two items that you will approve under the leadership of President Chris Maggio. And I just wanted to thank Chris for 33 plus years of service to my alma mater and for doing an extraordinary job picking up all the pieces that were left by your predecessor as president. And thank you on behalf of the entire system for just being a model of leadership and optimism and student-focused presidency. So, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Jones, are there any other introductions? These agenda items have been reviewed by staff and are recommended for approval. Of course, if any member has questions or wishes to discuss them, please let me know. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Is there any discussion? If no one requires further clarification of these agenda items, may I have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Board Member Clark, all right, and seconded by Mr. Kitchens. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Do we have any further business at this time? If not, that concludes the business of the Personnel Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board Member Donahoe. And now we'll have Legislation Committee, Board Member Russell.
Yes, the regular session of the Louisiana Legislature concluded its business earlier this month. Ms. Cammie Geisman is here to provide a brief overview of the legislation that impacted our 9-member institutions.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Good afternoon, board members. I'm going to try to keep this brief and give a quick overview of what happened in the past couple months. The legislature concluded their business on June 10th, and several bills affect our work of our system and our 9-member institutions. I'm just going to go over a few and answer any questions if you have them. Some of our general legislation bills, SB 60 by Neil Reiser allows for intercollegiate athletes to earn compensation from their own name, image, and likeness. We'll talk about this, about our system level policy in response to this bill and a little later in this meeting. HCR 19 by Ken Brass created a task force to study how to develop a more diverse group of candidates for head coach and athletic director positions at public universities. The task force will include several system representatives, including Dr. Henderson, Grambling's athletic director, and the executive director of the Doug Williams Center for the Study of Race and Politics in Sports. Dr. Henderson testified on this bill multiple times to ensure that we were properly represented. HB 42 by Paula Davis, known as the Truth in Borrowing Bill, will have universities provide more transparency to students borrowing money for their education. We talked a lot about power-based violence throughout the session and in this report. So we have 4 power-based violence bills that were approved by the legislature. HB 409 by Amy Freeman and SB 230 by Beth Mizell mirrored each other. Both expand on the state's current sexual misconduct statute. Among the changes are updated reporting protocols, requirement for MOUs with local law enforcement, adjustments to the campus climate survey, additional training requirements, including training for management boards, and coordination of intercampus communication with students under investigation who attempt to transfer. HB 394 by Neil Reiser deals with reporting requirements of campus incidents. SB 232 by Regina Barrow creates the power-based violence review panel that Dr. Henderson mentioned earlier. That panel will review and advise on policies related to power-based violence on campuses. Dr. Henderson and a UL System student representative will serve on the panel. Erica will discuss some of the deadlines associated with these bills during the President's report. Now, the budget. You know, before we started this session, it was looking pretty grim, and we're happy to report at the conclusion of the session, higher ed received $97.1 million more when compared to the current fiscal year. This marks the highest reinvestment in higher ed in 13 years and is a huge step toward properly funding higher education. Our system received nearly $245 million in state general fund, an increase of nearly $27 million over last year. And of course, our legislative priority the past few years has been reinvestment in our faculty. The legislature allocated nearly $20 million for pay raises for institutions statewide. We expect our 9-member institutions will be able to provide a 2.5% to 3% raise for our faculty, and that's really important. And the system also received a direct appropriation, $500,000 to develop research and grant opportunities at the system level that we're really excited about, and then $250,000 for the promotion of Compete Louisiana. And Compete LA was a huge, it's just, the legislature is a huge fan of Compete LA. They always get excited when we talk about it. So we're really excited to bring that program to scale, and this will go a long way in helping us do that. We had Senate confirmations. Mr. Busada, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Davis, and Mr. Carter were all confirmed, which is great news. And overall, we had a very successful legislative session. We cultivated new relationships with some of the new legislators and continue to benefit from the champions we already have. There'll be a redistricting session in February, and then the general session begins March 14th. And in the interim, we'll continue to work with our legislators and engage throughout the year to ensure that we're prioritized. So that's it.
Madam Chair, if I could, I would want to thank Governor Edwards, Commissioner Darden, and the entire legislature for their support of higher education. This first of what I hope will be many steps in closing the competition gap for faculty is appreciated. This is the strongest budget that higher ed has had in 13 years, and we're grateful for that. It doesn't solve our problem when it comes to recruiting, retaining, and developing faculty, and we'll continue to work with our legislative leaders and other partners to ensure that that aspect of our work is prioritized, and it will certainly be our key legislative priority going into next year as well. And Cammie, thank you for your leadership throughout the session.
This is a report only. No action is required of the board. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Or any questions or comments from the public? Do we have any other business at this time? If not, that concludes the business of the Legislation Committee.
Thank you, Board Member Russell. I would like to go forward and have our president's report conducted by Dr. Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board members, you were emailed copies of the personnel actions for your review. The staff has reviewed all of these personnel actions and recommends approval. Mr. Chairman, we'll need a motion and a second.
Can we get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Salter. Mr. Salter, and seconded by Board Member Pierre. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? So approved.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Management and Leadership Institute for their thoughtful presentation this morning. It was compelling. And I did not tear up this time, but I typically do, and that took all of my wherewithal. What an incredible group of leaders, and what a positive future that it bodes for our system. I also want to appreciate the work that was done this past year in the leadership of Dr. Caprice Ayub, who just stepped out. And she puts together a meaningful and timely program every year, but this time was in with some extraordinary challenges. Congratulations to the 4th cohort. The expectations are huge. I'm looking at you three because you're left. And Joel, so thank you very much. Last week, we held our first in-person event as a system in more than a year. And what an event it was. We gathered on the beautiful campus of UL Lafayette. I want to thank President Savoy for his extraordinary hospitality at a beautiful facility. We welcomed nearly 400 people for the system's inaugural Black Male Summit. I appreciate the board members who were able to participate in the summit and the opening reception. The highlight of the event was introducing our first cohort of RF Lewis scholars. These young men have immense promise. They'll receive an unmatched educational experience thanks to community partnership and the commitment of our system staff. Claire Norris is at the table to give us a brief update on the summit and the scholar program. Claire.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd be remiss if I didn't start by thanking this board for their commitment to diversity and inclusive work. Chair Carter, you brought the concept of the Reginald F. Lewis Equity Initiative to our system. Dr. Henderson, your vision and your trust for your staff is so incredible that we were able to conceptualize and operationalize what that meant. As you guys know, a year ago, we all together grappled with how to handle some of the social ills that we were facing, including the incident with George Floyd, as well as the pandemic and the disparities in terms of health outcomes. And so we had 2 of our Management and Leadership Institute fellows come and ask how we could celebrate the work that we've done, but just continue to learn. And so we put together a 40-person council. You know your council is a little too big when Dr. Henderson kind of gasped that you have 40 people on a council. We separated that into 4 subcommittees: the Student Experience Committee, the Faculty and Staff Committee. We had the Summit Planning Committee, but also external partnerships. We were intentional about the external partnership piece because we know that it takes the work of the community. And so we came together and we've come up with some really incredible recommendations. One concept that emerged was the RF Lewis Scholars, which a few of our board members have met, and they're incredible young men. We intend to give them the top-of-the-line experiences, including study abroad, mentorship, research experiences, and social experiences. We thank you guys for meeting them. We thank you for reaching out to them. We thank you for your financial commitment to them. And we recognize that you guys support us, and we thank you for that.
I might add that the scholars are scheduled to be with us at the August board meeting so you can meet them in person. And they'll be wearing their new Reginald F. Lewis Scholars blazers.
That's exactly right.
Oh.
That's exactly
That
right. They will be here for a retreat. They'll be here for a retreat for a day and a half where they'll really get to be introduced to higher education and the work that we do. Any questions?
Don't you go anywhere. Very important that you never know the impact that you can have on the life of a person in space and time by giving them some encouragement this particular initiative is born out of the Reginald Lewis concept and your leadership, Dr. Henderson, and this entire board, and the support of the entire board in doing this is one of these breakout sort of measures that's not only good for Louisiana, but good for the entire nation. So I like to say that we have some of the best programmatic ideas, initiatives that this world has to offer right out of the University of Louisiana System. This is why we make a point to highlight faculty that's doing incredible things. We have research and science with the COVID-19 vaccine developments. We have individuals doing great writings, et cetera, in this particular system. And so it brings us to your leadership, Doctor. You've done an incredible job, Dr. Norris, in putting together this first cohort, if you will, but I promise you will go down in history. And the staff will go down in history for all the great work they have done to support this particular initiative, because it's not only from a macro perspective, but it has eternal and universal implications to it. So I want to thank you so much for your vision, your leadership, your guidance in developing this. I want to thank Dr. Henderson for making sure that this particular initiative gets the type of attention it needs. You had a national known speaker. You had these great, very brilliant young men there, and I'm just so excited about that. So I wanted to publicly thank you, thank the board, thank everyone involved to make this inaugural happen. So I do have 2 questions for you. One is, how has it been raising money for your initiative and our initiative? And then 2, based upon how much money you raise, how much more do you need?
Thanks, great questions. So as you guys know, this is gonna be a campaign effort. We are gonna work to raise money. We've already started. We have so many of our system presidents who've supported it, board members who've supported this, and we thank you guys. We are at about $15,000. We need quite a bit more, but we have pledges from our community that have said we are ready and armed to support you, and so we're excited about that. We will continue the campaign throughout the next year, just for this cohort, but you know, our comms team is working on putting together packages. They have done an incredible job in messaging, and so we are thankful for that. Each cohort will be about $500,000 to support.
$500 million?
Yes, $500 million. About $500,000 to
Okay.
support, and that includes, again, the study abroad. We don't want our scholars telling us they can't go because they can't afford a passport. We will get them their passport.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, just to make sure we're clear, that's $500,000 per cohort, so that covers that cohort for 3 years. We have an established goal to, within a year from now, to have raised the sufficient funds for the first 3 cohorts. So that'd be right at $1.6 million is our year 1 goal. Based on the response we've gotten from some corporate partners and some individuals and some community partners like the Committee of 100, excuse me, the 100 Black Men, like the state NAACP, and Mike McClanahan, the state director, was in Lafayette for our inaugural summit. I have no doubt we'll be able to exceed that dollar amount, and we appreciate all of your contributions and your generosity.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to thank you for, I mean, you first visited me in Natchitoches almost 7 years ago, and a key part of our conversation laid the foundation for what would become our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you were the one that brought Loida Lewis and the Reginald F. Lewis idea to our system, and I want to thank you for that from the bottom of my heart, because it is truly transformative work that's going to impact this state for generations to come. Thank you for that.
And I would like to respond to that by saying that without the collective of folks like yourself who have the mindset and the vision, like Einstein said, you know, imagination is more important than knowledge, these type of initiatives wouldn't go forward. I would like to remind everyone on this board that when Thurgood Marshall argued the case to Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, it was not, he argued to a group of all white men on the Warren Court at that particular time, and they decided to do the right thing, and came to the holding that separate but equal is inherently unequal. Likewise, in various movements in this country's history, it's always a collective that's been able to change the modus operandi of a nation. And so Board Member Stevens was there at the cohort. Dr. Clark was there, and all of you all have been there, and it takes this multi-racial, multi-ethnic understanding to go forward and really do systemic change in incredible ways. One of the things that Dr. Norris in her wisdom decided to do is make sure that though this is called the Black Male Summit, that everyone in society has a role to play in this, not just black males, not just white males, not just females, et cetera. And so that's what was presented in a way that was truly profound. And it's consistent with the way movements have happened in this country through the civil rights movement, et cetera, through the founding of certain organizations that have been civil rights organizations, such as the Urban League, et cetera. It was not all black, it wasn't all white, it was a collective. And to that extent, I would like to, again, congratulate the various universities for the great work that you're doing to reimagine situations that are more attuned to great thinking, universal thinking. And I'm just so proud of what's happening at UNO. I see Dr. Niccolo back there, my hometown, and a great and multifaceted, dynamic stuff that he's doing, as well as the various universities in the system. So I'm very proud to be a part of this cohort going forward, and I'm just very, very excited and I want to thank all of you all for your tremendous contributions to a cause greater than ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank Claire Norris, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that tomorrow Claire Norris has a milestone birthday. I won't tell you
29.
I won't tell you which one it is, but I will say that it means that we have 30 more years of her service at our system. So. We mentioned that last week was our first in-person event, and of course today is our first in-person board meeting in a year. And the excitement we feel to have some return to a sense of normalcy is wonderful. But as much as we remain hopeful for a very normal academic year, we have to be cognizant of the unknowns that are still lingering. And that we brought our university presidents together to talk about our COVID-19 protocols going forward. Dr. Kahn's going to share some more of the information on our university's plans for this fall.
Thank you, Dr. Yes, thank you, Dr. Henderson. After 18 months of tackling challenges associated with the pandemic and navigating the uncharted waters of COVID-19, we are all extremely relieved to be on the road to recovery. Recently, our universities welcomed their personnel back to their offices, opened up campuses for in-person orientation session and campus tours, and rolled out course offerings with as much face-to-face instruction as possible for the new academic year. The hope and the expectation is that fall 2021 will be very similar to fall 2019, the last full normal semester before the all-consuming international crisis occurred. As our campus leaders plan for fall 2021, rest assured COVID-19 is not being treated as inconsequential or non-existent. What has been, is, and will remain the #1 priority of our institutions is the health, safety, and well-being of all faculty, staff, and students. That will always and will forever be paramount. As such, leadership remains vigilant by ensuring mitigation plans are in place for the months to come. Such plans include continuing to offer vaccination opportunities on campus or in partnership with local providers, messaging and communication initiatives encouraging faculty, staff, and students to be vaccinated will continue, and some campuses are even thinking about implementing incentive plans very similar to what Governor Edwards just announced this week, not of that magnitude, but of that potential experience. Testing will remain widely available on campus sites with protocol in place to handle positive cases and contact tracing. And those individuals that are unvaccinated will be encouraged to do routine testing. All of our institutions have installed air filtration devices into HVAC systems in buildings across the campuses to allow for a healthy airflow. And in addition, hand sanitation stations will remain in prominent locations. Many will keep physical barriers such as plexiglass that are in front of a lector in a classroom. They will remain in place unless there are specific reasons to remove or to adjust. When it comes to masks, the majority of our campuses are complying with guidance provided by the UL system, Governor Edwards, and of course the CDC. Masks are not required. They are optional for fully vaccinated individuals, and those not vaccinated are encouraged to wear face coverings. All campuses will work very closely with those individuals that are not able to or do not wish to become vaccinated, especially those immunocompromised faculty, staff, and students that require accommodations for work purposes, or those students that need to be placed into a clinical or preceptorship setting that does require vaccination. And protocol has been put in place to help those individuals with those accommodations. Our 9 presidents and their leadership teams have and continue to plan as best as possible for our return to a post-pandemic normal. We all want nothing more than to bring students back for on-campus learning this fall. And mitigation plans currently underway will help to ensure that the transmission of COVID is minimal while also being agile. And as we know, we need to be agile in circumstances such as this so that we can adjust as we need to. Dr. Henderson, that concludes my very brief summary of COVID-19, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Members, at the beginning of June, we asked the Board of Regents, who has been the liaison between higher education and Louisiana Department of Health and Office of Public Health, to begin working with LDH to prepare to add the COVID-19 vaccine to the list of mandated vaccines. It's under their protocol once it has received full use authorization from the FDA. We expect that work to be done. Now that those vaccine mandates come with all the exemptions that are, if it's medically contraindicated, if there's a philosophical or religious reason that a student would like to document, those exemptions will remain. Those are in state statute. And we look forward to that as well. I also want to caution everyone that this is still a very dynamic situation. Right now, the aspect of the virus that is becoming most prevalent is the Delta variants. I know we've all become amateur epidemiologists, but if I could real quickly, when the Alpha variant, that's the B117 variant that was first discovered in the UK, was announced, it was determined that it had about a 60% more transmissibility than the original COVID-19 virus. The Delta variant is 60% more transmissible than the Alpha variant. This is an incredibly infectious variant of a very serious disease. The best protection against it is vaccination. And we have amazing, unrestricted access, free access to a vaccine that can eradicate the threat of COVID-19. We're going to continue to message that very strongly on our campuses. We're going to provide access to those vaccines on our campuses. We're going to try to dismiss as much of the misinformation that continues to proliferate online. I say quite often that data doesn't change opinions, memes do. And memes are just spreading so much misinformation about this vaccine. It is safe, it is effective, and even against the Delta variant, the Pfizer vaccine has been shown to be 96% effective against hospitalization with this variant. That's extraordinary. That doesn't mean that you have a 4% chance of being hospitalized. It means you're 96% more protected against hospitalization than those that contract the virus that aren't vaccinated. We're going to continue to send that messaging out, and hopefully we'll have our communities respond effectively. We've got a lot of work to do in Louisiana to get that message out, and we're going to continue to be champions of it. The governor's new incentive program, I'm already registered. If I win the $1 million, I'll still come to work. But hopefully we'll be able to use that for the betterment of all. But we appreciate your leadership on that as well. Shifting gears to Title IX and the power-based violence, there's been some reporting deadlines that are associated with the landmark legislation that was passed during this session. I'd ask Erica Calais to come forward. She'll present briefly on these new requirements for our member institutions because they do impact the board as well. Erica?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Good afternoon again. I would like to begin by thanking those of you who were able to join us for the STAR workshop last month. The presentation was informative, and if you have any follow-up questions or concerns, please let me know. Violence bill, reporting requirements, and I'll just give you a brief overview. One of the reporting requirements is actually due October the 10th, and this is a report that will be submitted to each president by the Title IX coordinator. And the president, it's submitted to the president. It is a written report on incidents, reporting to the coordinator on the appropriate revised statute. And that is a report that is required to be submitted every 6 months, October 10th and April 10th. And these dates, you'll notice, are kind of all over the place, but these are the dates that were given to us. Each management board is required to submit an annual system-wide summary report to the Board of Regents on December 31st. The Board of Regents is required to submit an annual report to the governor, president of the Senate, speaker of the House, and House of Representatives and Senate and House committees on education. That report is due on January the 15th. University Police Department shall submit an annual report on any sexually oriented criminal offenses that occurred on the campus to the system president on February 15th. And that report should also go to the institution's president and the Title IX coordinator. The presidents are required to submit any reports that they receive from their Title IX coordinators regarding incidents that the coordinator has cause to believe that the safety of any person is in imminent danger. And that report is required to be submitted to the system president within 14 days of the president receiving the report from the Title IX coordinator. And the system president will be required to submit that report to the management board within 14 days of him or her receiving that report, in our case, him. So all of these reports will be placed on the institution's websites. The reports that we receive in the system office are required to be placed on our website, and all of the reporting that goes to the Board of Regents will be placed on the Board of Regents website. There is a lot of reporting involved. We will make sure that our campus personnel understand the significance of these mandates and follow through with them. I will be meeting with the Title IX coordinators and our vice presidents of student affairs and deans of students on tomorrow morning to have a conversation with them about these reporting requirements. Any questions?
Erica has been an exemplar of systemness in working with campus representatives as we develop our policies and our responses to all these things. Erica, can't thank you enough for your leadership in that regard. We deeply appreciate that. For the board members to understand, so this is power-based violence, and quite often it's easy to conflate this with Title IX. And certainly there is some overlap and there's Title IX considerations, but Title IX is not the extent of our work to combat power-based violence on our campuses. Recently, the U.S. Department of Education had a listening session as they start to develop new regulations associated with Title IX. I've seen a report that the new regulations are expected next spring, so probably March of 2022. Our work is about student conduct, and these new policy advances and our new policy environment are effective now. They're student-focused, they're trauma-informed, they're victim-focused. We're going to continue to push this forward until our culture is one that prevents the occurrence of sexual violence, and when those occurrences do happen, that we're responding quickly, safely, and with the needs of the victim first in our minds. But Erica, thank you again for your leadership.
You're
on
welcome.
that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I'd just like to echo, thank you for your leadership. Incredible job.
Another piece of legislation that passed was SB 60, which is associated with name, image, and likeness. You've seen this. The NCAA has been debating name, image, and likeness compensation for athletes for years, and nothing has changed. The federal government and Congress is debating legislation about name, image, and likeness, and they will move at the speed of Congress to pass such legislation. So we'll wait on that with bated breath. But we have it now in Louisiana. Louisiana is about a half dozen states set to have name, image, and likeness legislation take effect on July 1st. Our legislation requires the management boards to adopt policies before athletes can capitalize on these new regulations. Kami sent the policy to you yesterday. The reason it was sent to you just yesterday is because this is brand-new legislation. In fact, has it been signed into law? No, it has not been signed into law yet. It will be, by all signals indicate it will be soon. But the policy has to be in place July 1. So if you have questions on that come up, please let us know. We work closely with our athletic directors and other experts to develop this policy. I think it's one of the most sound that exists anywhere in the country. It's been a month and a half that we've worked closely, and Bruce, thank you again for your leadership with that as well. But this policy meets the needs of our intercollegiate athletes as well as our departments. I want you to think about the incredible Shaquilla Hill, who had 2 quadruple doubles during her stalwart career at Grambling State University. That young woman deserved the benefits of compensation for the use of her name, image, and likeness. She could have capitalized on that extraordinary level. Those are the types of athletes that we're trying to assist with this, and I think this is a very, very progressive act, and we were happy to support it. But if anyone has any questions on the name, image, and likeness regulations, please let me know. Compete Louisiana, I want to tell you with some pride that this last spring, we celebrated 28 graduates through the program. So we've graduated 65 students through the Compete Louisiana program already, and we have yet to spend $1 on marketing. That changes now. We launched our first ad campaign featuring our TV ad that we shared with you last fall. The ad's introducing the program to Louisianans with some college credit and our target age demographics. We'll continue promoting the program through traditional advertising campaigns, thanks to the legislature's investment in this program this last session. We've also partnered, this is very exciting, with Commissioner Darden to promote Compete Louisiana to state employees. We have a number of state employees that have some college and no degree. Next week, he will send information about Compete LA to the more than 70,000 state employees next week, and we look forward to serving those ready to finish their degrees in the coming months. Not all 70,000 will register this year, but I hope at least half of them will. This program is filled with a lot of promise, and I couldn't be more excited about the leadership of Katie Dawson. Welcome to Baton Rouge. She is now a Baton Rouge resident, and the continued work of our 5 Compete LA coaches. Mr. Chairman, we would like to discuss some pending litigation with the board and give some updates on that, and we would need a motion and a second to enter into executive session for that purpose.
Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. 2 so moved. So, Board Member Kitchen moved and seconded by Board Member Pierre. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait, you have 2 here. You have 1 down here. You have 1 down. You have 1 down up, and you have 1 down up. Okay. All right. Right. Thank you. The Board of Supervisors for the University of Louisiana System may meet in executive session to discuss litigation matters under the provisions of Louisiana Revised Statute 4217. While in executive session, the board may not make any motions or take any votes. Okay, may I have a motion and a second to go into executive session? Let's do it again. All right. From Board Member Kitchens and seconded by Board Member Pierre. We need a roll call vote.
Mr. Busada, Mr. Carter,
Yes.
Dr. Clark,
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Ms. Donahoe,
Yes.
Mr. Kitchen,
Yes.
Ms. Methvin,
Yes.
Ms. Pierre,
Yes.
Mr. Romero,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
Mr. Salter,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right. Well, we'll go into executive session now. Thank you.
I guess we're gonna come back.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
y'all. Thank you.
We've just been able to weave our way